kale salad I'll show you is really meant to be something that you'll add to another dish. You can eat it the way that I'm preparing it, but it's actually a good way to get it ready to put another flavoring or dressing or include it in a bowl. It's not the most flavorful as is. This is really just making it easier to chew, more tender, a little more flavorful when it is in another dish. So we have what would be a bunch of kale. So if you buy a bunch of kale at the grocery store, it's going to look like this, maybe have a band around the bottom. So this is where we've taken the band off, we've washed it in a couple changes of water. You'll notice that if you look at the bottom, if you try and rinse it in a bowl, you'll see there's a bunch of sand in the bottom. You want to make sure you've gotten all of that off, otherwise you'll have this grit in your teeth that's just really not pleasant to eat at all. So, and then we've spun it dry in a salad spinner, which has been demonstrated in other videos. So now we just want to make sure that we're getting rid of this thick rib here in the middle of the kale. Since we're going to be having this as a raw preparation, this is not easy to chew, digest. It's a good way to floss your teeth and eat at the same time. You get lots of fibers in your teeth, which is, again, not something you want to do. So there's a few ways that you can get the kale off the rib. So this one's a little broken. This one I think will be better. So you can just hold the rib in one hand and then grab the base of where the leaf starts in the other hand and just pull in opposite directions. There you go. So you have the rib and the kale. And if there's little pieces you want to make sure to reduce food waste, you can pull those off. But pretty effective way to separate the kale from the stem. And the stem's a little broken, so it's a little trickier, but still do the same thing. Here we go. Make pretty quick work of the whole head of kale or bunch of kale. The other way that you can do this is with a knife. So if that is tricky for you, or your stems are broken and they're not cooperating like that one I just showed you, then you can take your kale leaf. So here's the whole leaf. I'm folding it in half, so the leafy part is one direction and then the rib or stem is the other direction. And then you can just slice along the edge of the rib with your knife, and that's a nice, neat way to remove it. And you can see there's no rib at all. So either of those ways works fine. If you have younger kale and the stems are really thin, or you're slicing the kale really fine, you could avoid removing them, but I would definitely encourage you to do this. The flavor and texture will be much better. I would also encourage you to do this on your own at home, because when you buy the pre-chopped or sliced kale in the big bags at the grocery store, these stems are the heaviest part of the kale. So they'll leave these in and just include them in there. So you have all these big chunks of fibrous stuff in there, which aren't pleasant. So there's a few other ways that you can do this before you add the toppings that we're going to. So you can just rip it up with your hands if you want bigger pieces. One way that I find really nice besides doing that is if you, especially if you have people who are having a little bit more trouble chewing, if you take it and roll it up. This is kind of like you would do with basil. It's called a chiffonade. So you roll up a leaf and then tuck your fingers under like a claw, put your knife down on the cutting board, and then you're basically going to make shreds, almost kind of like about the thickness that you would have for cabbage and coleslaw. Just crawl your fingers back as you do that. Get the whole leaf. All right. And then now you have these nice shreds. You can further chop those up. If you want them smaller pieces, you can even chop it up a little bit more. And then that's going to be, again, a lot easier to get tender. You're not going to have to massage it as long as what I'll show you in just a minute with the bigger pieces. Lots of variations. You could also do this with collard greens, any other sort of tougher green that you would normally cook. So let's rip this up into little pieces. Also very therapeutic if you just need to not think about your day, get in the kitchen, get your hands in something, fresh out of the garden or from the farmer's market. It's just a very zen thing to do here. Also a great thing that you can do with kids, so everyone can safely rip up kale or lettuce. And we do have a separate technique video on how to wash and store greens and herbs. If you properly wash and store herbs and greens, they'll actually last quite a while. The exception is the spring mix or the baby lettuces. Those don't last very long at all. But you can get kale to last, a few weeks in the fridge if you store it the right way. So make sure to check that out if you're curious about learning how to make your greens last longer. Having things like kale can also add a lot of efficiency to your cooking. So since this is gonna last longer than some of the more delicate lettuces, you can keep it longer in your fridge if you're not shopping regularly. And then you can also, if you make a salad with kale in it at night instead of regular greens, then you can actually still eat it the next day. So it's, you know, one of the few types of salad where you can make it the night before and actually eat it for lunch the next day. It doesn't keep much longer than that, so I wouldn't recommend trying to eat it days later, but it's going to work out for you to have leftovers and do that. So I'm gonna put, you won't waste anything, I'll put the rest of my kale back in there. Now we're ready to massage this and make a simple kale salad. So the things that are gonna help tenderize these tougher leaves are some lemon, some oil, some salt. Again, if you're going lower on the oil, you can certainly not add the oil, that's fine. You don't need to replace it with anything, you're just going to use a little bit more elbow grease. And you know, you can always add a little more lemon if it's finicky. But I'll cut my lemon in half. Probably not gonna need this whole thing. Just going to squeeze the lemon into the kale. All right, we have that. And then we're just gonna put a pinch of salt. And then we're just gonna, again, I told you this is very therapeutic. You just get in there and massage that. There's not a good way to do this, I would say, without getting your hands a little dirty. So don't be shy. I always just get it started and then just add a little drizzle of oil. I'm probably not gonna use this whole thing. If you want to make this as a standalone salad, I would use more oil and lemon because then you're basically mixing a vinaigrette in there. You have your acid, you have your oil. If I'm going to make it where I'm going to top it with another dressing, I'd go pretty light on the lemon and the oil because I'm not trying to add too much flavor. I'm just trying to tenderize it. You can see that the volume of my kale is really reducing, so it looks like there's a lot less. And, you know, there's no perfect time to be done. I could be done now. If people, again, have trouble chewing, you know, really chewy things, then you can keep massaging for a while. You can get it actually quite broken down. It really depends on your purpose. All right, I think we're good there. And, you know, if you're including this as an ingredient in another dish where you're adding some kind of dressing or sauce, you don't really need to taste it for seasoning because that's going to be the seasoning. You taste it when you add that. And if you were seasoning it to taste now, you would just adjust for the level of acid and salt that you wanted. And if you wanted to add a little bit more oil for richness, you could. And if you wanted to kind of balance out the bitterness in the kale, this is really nice if you have like a sweeter dressing or you have some dried or fresh fruit. Just anything with a little sweetness is going to balance out the bitterness of the kale or the heartier greens that you'll use in a salad. Again, it could be standalone or it could be paired with one of the bowls or other salads. This is the simple or massaged kale salad.